You're listening to episode number 84 of the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. This is a Monday Q&A episode, and I'm going to answer Rebecca's question. And her question is, what are the habits of wealthy people? If you're not wealthy, you may want to listen to this episode. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Jim Fortin, and you're about to start transforming your life from the inside out with this podcast. I'm widely considered the leader in subconscious transformation, and I've coached super achievers all around the world for over 25 years. Here, you're going to find no rah-rah motivation and no hype, because this podcast is a combination of brain science, transformational psychology, and ancient wisdom all rolled into one to take your life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting a lot more in life, to feel better, to heal, to have peace of mind, to feel powerful and alive, and to bring more abundance and prosperity into your life, then this podcast is for you, because you're going to start learning how to master your mind and evolve your consciousness. And when you do that, anything you want then becomes possible for you. I'm glad you're here. Recently, actually a couple of weeks ago, a good friend of mine, his name is James Wedmore. He is a very wealthy individual. He is a multimillionaire. He is a leader in basically online business building and teaching people how to do that. And he was on vacation with me a couple of weeks ago here at my house in Sedona, he and his wife. And he said, "Hey, Jim, I'm creating a little series for 2020. And, I want to ask you to be part of that series. And I want you to share what you think the most important habit is to become a multimillionaire." And we were talking for a while. We were upstairs in the kitchen. And I said, "James, all these people run around talking about habits. I mean, there are tons and tons of books on habits. And I even have, actually, I think it's episode number 5 here, an episode on habits. And habits are absolutely vital, because you might have heard me say before, you don't get what you want in life. You get your habits." And I said, "James, I want to go a different direction, because a lot of people will say, oh, you should get in the habit of getting up in the morning early at 5 a.m., or you should read a book a week, or you should write down your goals," and all these external things. And I said, "James, that's not where I would start. If somebody asked me and they said, 'Hey, Jim, what's the most important habit to become wealthy?' Number one, I'm going to share with you what I shared with James, and I'm going to take it a little bit farther in this episode. But the number one thing that we can do to become healthy is getting into the habit of managing and creating and actually getting rid of habits that do not destroy us." So, in my interpretation, in my opinion, the number one habit of people that are very wealthy, even if they don't know they're doing it, they're in the habit of managing habits that are healthy and constructive habits when it comes to prosperity and wealth. And, I just alluded to on Facebook and Instagram, you see all the memes and people saying the top 5 habits of millionaires and the top 5 habits of wealthy people. And, a lot of times people will say things like the top 20 habits of millionaires. Well, I want to share with you, overall, that's a bunch of crap. Most people have a challenging time even managing one habit. I mean, who can manage like 20 habits? And I get a kick out of these memes when people say 10 things to do to be happy. And, one of the things, like number 1 is love yourself. Well, many people will spend a lifetime just trying to master number 1, forget the other 9. But, I coach. I only coach one-to-one. I coach multimillionaires. In my group programs, people learn about habits. But when people approach me for one-to-one coaching, they must be making at least $1 million per year. And I have my reasons for that. I'm not going to go into it in this podcast. Before I go there, though, I'm thinking about how I want to say this, but one of my brother-in-laws is a mutual fund manager for a $1 trillion company. He's been doing this for a lot of years, and he manages billions of dollars. He manages an entire fund. And not only that, he's one of the highest producing fund managers at this company. And I spend a lot of time with this brother-in-law. I don't know if I should say this, but he's a brother-in-law that I that I connect with the best out of all of my brother-in-laws on my partner's side of the family. candidly, he's got an amazing sense of humor, and he's a lot of fun to be around, and I really enjoy being around him. And he and my sister-in-law, they live in Boston, and they have a second home in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And I've spent a lot of time in both homes. And he definitely is a multimillionaire. And when I look at his habits, number one, he's not even on social media. Secondly, he does read a lot of stuff, but it's all about physics and consciousness and things about you hear me talking about in the podcast. But I never see him reading books on wealth or money management or any of that. He does get up early, but he goes to bed early as well. But when I look at this list of things that multimillionaires do, let's say 10 things, and I said they're floating all over Facebook, he might do 2 or 3, but he definitely doesn't do 10. He might even do 5, but I know that he doesn't do 10. So, I'm thinking here, there's so much misinformation in the world, and candidly, I mean this kindly, I think I mean it kindly, but so much garbage and so much nonsense, because many people who post a lot of this stuff about, well, the 10 habits of millionaires, I'm just going to tell you guys candidly, a lot of people who post that stuff are people that actually don't have 2 nickels to rub together. And the image comes to mind of the 89 movie, Tom Cruise in the movie Cocktail, where he was a bartender, but he always had like some kind of success book behind the bar. And I see so much of that, people posting these memes about how to be wealthy, how to be successful, but in their own life, they're not successful. And candidly, the reason why is that's more wishful left brain analytical thinking, and they're not reprogramming their unconscious mind. And then you see books like, I think there was a book many years ago called The Rockefeller Habits. Well, guys, Rockefeller didn't become the richest man in the world by those habits. I live in Texas and I live in Arizona, and back in the 1970s, one of the richest men, if not the richest person in the world, was a guy named H.L. Hunt. And he owned Hunt Petroleum, Hunt Oil, etc. And at that time, back in the 70s, he was worth about $5 billion. Well, I happen to know his grandson, and I haven't talked to him for a lot of years. Let me just say I used to know his grandson, and I've not talked to him in a lot of years. And one of his grandsons, because I think he had like 17 kids, and those kids have all had kids, which were his grandkids. As I heard the story from his grandson, he actually won oil leases in East Texas, I believe, in a poker game, and he actually tied somebody up, etc. It was kind of a crazy, wacky story. But he won the oil leases, which made him a billionaire over time, in a poker game. So, I mean, if you say, well, the habits of wealthy people, at one point he's one of the richest men in the world, and he won his fortune in a poker game. The reason I'm telling you all this is stop listening to all the memes and stop reading all the memes, and this is what I want to share with you, is the habits are not the same for everyone. But you know what? A lot of the motivational speakers and the personalities online will say, well, do all these things. Well, every brain is different, literally. How we process information, our traits are different. And what might work for person A might not work for person B. So let me share with you right now, in my interpretation, as I said, coaching multimillionaires. And I encourage, as I mentioned last week, I really encourage you to go back and listen to episode number 9, I believe is the episode number, on the law of attraction. But I explain it in a way that goes beyond the way that most people are talking about it. In my interpretation, the major number one habit that will make you a wealthy person is the habit of thinking like a wealthy person. Because as you know, if you've been, listening to my podcast for any amount of time, I'm always talking about be, do, have, not have, do, be. And doing is habit. But if you're not being a wealthy person, I really don't care how many habits you do. And I'm going to just share with you, just transparency here, many years ago, I used to just buy tons of books on creating wealth and how to be wealthy and all this kind of stuff. But you may have heard me say in another episode, I grew up poor. So my habit of thinking was there's never enough money. Life is a struggle. You got to work. You got to just grind, and you got to hustle, and you got to put in the hours, which is a load of crap. Because look at all the people in the world who do all that, and they're still poor, and they're still working 2 and 3 jobs. And I've read, I don't know, probably, and I don't know, at least 200, maybe 300 books by people like Stuart Wilde and Wayne Dyer and all these people for all these years. But you know what? I still wasn't wealthy. And I did all the things they told me to do, and I still wasn't wealthy. The reason why is because I was not wealthy in my unconscious identity. So, my opinion and my interpretation is the number one habit that you can create that will actually create wealth for you is the habit of thinking like a wealthy person. How would a wealthy person think? How would you think? Consider that for a moment. How would you think? And what would you be thinking, which you've heard me say again many times before? Be, do, have. Who do you have to be to do what you need to do to have what you want to have, which is the wealth? How would you think differently if you already had $10 million? That's where I want you to go because, see, you can go do all the stuff in the world. Like I said, all the habits in the world, and you can pedal the bike, metaphorically speaking, as fast as you want, uphill as long as you want. But if you're not rich, or until you're rich in your mind, the money will not come. I want you to look at your past. Look at the past 12 months. And I want you to look at how much wealth, abundance, and prosperity you brought into your life. Was it 100,000? Was it 40? Was it a million? Was it 2 million? Was it 10 million? How much wealth did you bring into your life? The amount of wealth you brought in was affected to some degree by your habits. But I want to share with you is that I guarantee you, let me say this, 99% of the time, because I can't guarantee anything, but 99% of the time, people who brought in significant wealth, they were in the habit of thinking like wealthy people. All of my personal friends, and I don't have a lot of friends by choice, and I'll just mention names here. It doesn't matter. And you might not even know these names, and that's okay too, because it's a big world. And they're not famous, but they are kind of well known online. One would be Drew Canoli, who owns Organifi. I've coached and mentored Drew for a lot of years. And his company literally has 9 figures a year in revenue. I've coached James Wedmore, who I'd mentioned, who's a personal friend of mine. And I know he said this publicly because I've coached him. When I started with him 2 years ago, he was at $2 million a year, and he's now at almost $10 million a year. And he has said that in public. So I don't really have a problem sharing that because he already has. When I look at, and I've got other friends that are akin to these two guys, but when I look at these two guys, you know what? One of them, Drew, for example, will tell part of his story that he grew up and his dad, I think, was a FedEx driver. They didn't have any money. But Drew thinks like a wealthy person. He's in the habit of constantly keeping his mind in a place of what would wealthy people do and how would they be. And I knew him when he was literally struggling. And now he's extremely financially comfortable. But even when he was struggling, he was building the mindset that brought him where he was today. So I go back to Rebecca and the rest of you. Stop focusing on the doing, and of course you want to do, but to me that's secondary. And what I would create the habit of is the habit of, air quotes, seeing myself and getting in a habit, on a daily basis of reinforcing that I'm rich. Money flows into my life. It's no longer the game of money in, money out, but it's money piles up in my bank accounts. And what I want to say here also is that, well, let me just share with you. What I was going to say is, let me share with you, because some of you guys, and this is crass, I think to some degree, but I do extremely well financially. And as I said, anyone that I coach one-to-one is a multimillionaire. So, kind of just figure out what that means in your own mind. But what are my habits? My habits are not the doing habits. And I do read voraciously. I think I have 300 books on my Kindle. And even that people say you have to read every day. One of my other friends, it's a mutual friend of James Wedmore, he's one of my closest friends, and he makes over $1 million a year. And he doesn't read any books, which I find interesting. He's just a marketing ninja just by his nature. He just gets it. And I've often said to him, you might want to pick up a book. You might want to learn some more. Maybe you can, make even more money. But he doesn't read any books. So my habits are not about doing things. My habits are about being things. So let's go here. What I do, I have an entire room in my house. Even though I call it the healing room, if you looked at it, you might think it's a meditation room. But I have spiritual artifacts from all over the world and places that I've been everywhere, from Machu Picchu to Haleakala to Chaco Canyon to Uluru and etc. And in this room every day, this is a habit, I start my day with 2 hours of silence. Now, I'm not putting on, and I listen to, for example, on Pandora, the station that I listen to most is 70s folk radio. Croce and, Jim Croce and Cat Stevens and stuff like that. But I take my time in the morning and I set my intention for what I want to create. But more than anything, I don't set my intention for what I want to create. What I set my intention for is how many people can I serve? And if you ask me, Jim, what is your major habit? If you just could pick one habit, I think I'd have to split that to two, but let me share two major habits. The number one major habit that I have is I think of my students first. Because see, I'm trading energy with my students, meaning they're giving me money to lead them in transformation. And anyone that's been in any of my programs will tell you that I over deliver. And the reason that I over deliver is because I know that the more that I serve with an open heart, meaning, you know what, let me assist you, let me take you to the next level, even if I've got to be the bridge and you've got to walk on me, metaphorically speaking. When I get you to the other side, guess what? I'm going to get my compensations energetically. So my major habit, if you ask me for one habit, and it's hard for me to do, one, I've got two major ones, but my major habit is to think of you first. And even, case in point, look at this podcast. I don't listen to podcasts. I don't listen to anyone else's. As I've mentioned before, in my very first year, we're going to do 1 million downloads. But my objective when I'm doing these episodes for you is it's not information, it's transformation is the way that I look at it. And how can I open my heart and just give away as much as I possibly can to assist you? Will you become a student of mine in one of my programs? Maybe. The majority of you won't, but that's okay too, because guess what? If you can pick something up from me in this podcast that makes your life a little bit better, a little bit easier, more prosperity, more health, more wellness, more abundance, then guess what? I've done my job. And then secondly, another habit is gratitude. And I had mentioned on another podcast how my brother-in-law, the shaman, taught me this, to start developing gratitude is to literally, I drink a lot of water every day and I have a Contigo container and I fill it up like 4 times a day. I drink a gallon a day of water. And every time I fill it up, what I do is I hold the Contigo container and I give gratitude and I give blessing and I give thanks for the water, which started to habituate. Remember, we're talking about habits. I started habituating the habit of being in gratitude. So those are my two major habits, is thinking of you first, how may I serve, to give with an open heart, and to over-deliver. And even as you hear me say that, what if you took that approach in your business and you had the habit of thinking from prosperity consciousness, and you had the habit of thinking of what can I do for my students first? How can I impact them? What's going to affect them well before me? Because see, most people get into, oh, I can't do X, Y, Z because that's going to affect me in a certain way. I never, ever, ever go there. Where I go is what can I do to serve you first? Now, back to my question. Where would your business be if you had high prosperity consciousness and you knew that you could attract money, because money's everywhere? I mean, there's a million ways to make $1 million. And so you already had that in place, and then you work from the habit of, let me just serve the world. Let me just serve people that are in my target market, people that are in my demographic. You would have more money piling up in your bank account. You would be wealthier than you could ever imagine if you worked from that paradigm. What I want you to do, survey your life. And I want you to look back at the past year And I want you to get objective and look at, okay, what habits move me forward and what habits actually created movement for me? Many years ago, and you may or may not know, and I'm sure I've mentioned it here, but I also teach, and I haven't really fully full-time. I teach, I work in transformation more than anything else. But I used to coach high-end real estate agents, people that were literally in the $1 million a year income range. And one of my students once said, he goes, Jim, when I use your persuasion and influence content, my sales go way up, my closing ratios. But when I don't, they go way down. My whole point is look at the habits that take your life way up and look at the habits that take your life way down. And then what you want to do is you want to habituate the things that take your life up and move you forward. And then also on episode number 5, I think I shared with you in that episode or another one on habits, on how to eliminate counterproductive habits and habits that pull you backwards. So you have no excuse, because I know here in one of the episodes, I've covered that for you guys. But look at your last year and you develop more. And by the way, and I'm not actually, I was going to go into it and I'm not. Just listen to the episode on habits, because I don't want to repeat myself here when it's already over in that episode. And I talk a lot more in depth in that episode on habits. But look at the habits that move the needle in a positive way for you, and then habituate those behaviors. That coupled with prosperity consciousness, and I cannot, like I said, episode number 9, I cannot reinforce this enough. You can do habits all day long. Like I told you, all the books that I used to read, but yet I'd look at my checking account and I had no money. You want to habituate prosperity consciousness. Okay, so your transformational takeaway this week is get into the habit of habits that move you forward with measurable outcomes, and get in the habit of thinking like a wealthy person. Now, you could say, well, if I'm not wealthy, how can I be in the habit of thinking like a wealthy person? I've also covered that in earlier episodes. I don't know if this is your first episode or if you've been with me, since the beginning of this podcast. But you've heard me say before, go back to the very first episode, every one of you, go back to the very first episode and start there again, because I promise you there are things that you've missed in the earlier episodes. We get bits and pieces. It's the way our brain works. But go back to the earlier episodes, and especially on habits and wealth. So observe your habits and look at what habits move you forward in a positive way. Get in the habit of actually serving with an open heart. Get in the habit of setting your intention and being grateful every single day, and specifically get in the habit of thinking like a wealthy person. And as I just alluded to, I'm not going to even go into what the last one looks like, because I cover it in early episodes. All right, next episode coming up, Wednesday episode. This is an episode that I'm very, very passionate about. And obviously, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm very passionate pretty much about every episode, or I wouldn't be doing it if I wasn't passionate about it. But the title of the next episode is You're Not a Prisoner of Your Circumstances. You're a prisoner of your interpretations. Whatever you do, whoever you are, make sure, if you want to move the needle in a big way in 2020, make sure that you listen to that episode. Okay, thanks for listening. I appreciate it, and do what you can to make it a great day today. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this entire podcast. If you're the kind of person who likes to help others, then share this with your friends and family. If you found value, they will too. So please share via your social media channels. Also, if you have questions, I'm here to assist. You can email me questions to support@jimfortin.com, and I may even use your question for a future podcast episode. Also, if you want transformational content like this daily, connect with me on Instagram. My Instagram name is I am Jim Fortin. Finally, I do have a personal request. I believe that we're all here to help others and to grow and evolve ourselves. Together, you and I, let's help more people. If you would please leave a review on iTunes, and a good one, by the way. I'd be grateful, and through your assistance together, we can transform more lives. Thanks for listening.